drove a forgotten federal judge home from the VA hospital every Tuesday night for almost a year. When his will was read, his daughter screamed that I'd stolen everything. I was already buttoning my coat to leave when the lawyer set down his pen, looked up at me over those thin gold glasses, and asked me very quietly, "Mr. Donovan, do you know who your father was? If you're watching, drop the name of your town in the comments. I want to see where this story finds people. My name is Frank Donovan. I'm 65 years old. I retired from the Chicago Fire Department after 31 years on the job, and I've been a widower for 9 of them. My wife Eileen passed in the fall of 2016, pancreatic, 8 weeks from the diagnosis to the funeral. The boys came home for the service, and then they left, and I haven't had a real conversation with any of them since. I live in a 2-bedroom walk-up on the north side, the same one Eileen and I bought in 1989. The radiator clangs. The kitchen tile is from the Reagan administration. There's a chair by the window where Eileen used to read, and I haven't sat in it once since she died. I sit in the other one. I drink black coffee from the same mug. I watch the building across the alley turn its lights on at 6 and off at 11. That's my evening. My oldest boy, Daniel, told me at the funeral that I never let his mother be soft. He said I made the whole house feel like a firehouse. Brendan, the middle one, just stopped picking up. He's in Denver now. Got married 3 years back. I found out from a Facebook photo somebody tagged. My youngest, Connor, sent me a Father's Day card the 1st June after Eileen died, and that was the last thing I got from him. He's a teacher in Portland. I have his address on a Christmas card I never sent because I didn't know what to write that wouldn't sound like a report from a man he didn't know. I started driving for the VA shuttle in early 2024 because the apartment got too quiet on Tuesday nights. The VFW posted the volunteer sign-up on a corkboard, and I figured a few hours behind the wheel was better than another night staring at the alley. The route ran from the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center out to a handful of nursing homes and assisted living places on the north and west sides. Some of the guys I picked up could still walk. Some couldn't. Most of them didn't say much. Vets know how to ride in silence. I met him on the 2nd Tuesday of March. The intake nurse wheeled out a tall, thin man in a wool overcoat that had to be 40 years old. Cashmere, the kind nobody buys anymore. His shoes were polished. His hair was white and combed back, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved out of something harder than the rest of us. The clipboard said, Harlan Whitfield. The address was a place out in Wilmette called Lakeshore Manor. I'd driven guys out there before. Private pay. Expensive. I helped him into the front seat because he asked. Most of them want the back. He buckled his own seatbelt with hands that shook just a little, and he looked out the windshield like he was reading something written across it. Cold night, I said. It is, he said. That was the whole conversation for 40 minutes. When I pulled up to the front entrance of Lakeshore Manor, an aide came down the steps to collect him, and he turned to me before he got out. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Frank's fine. Frank, he said, and he held the name in his mouth like he was tasting it. Then he climbed out and walked up the steps without looking back. The next week, he was on the manifest again. And the week after that, same overcoat, same combed hair, same silence in the front seat. The 4th Tuesday, somewhere around the Edens Junction, he cleared his throat. What did you do, Frank, before this? Fire department. 31 years. He nodded slowly. Captain. Made lieutenant. Turned down captain twice. Didn't want the desk. A man who knows what he wants. A man who's stubborn, I said. Different thing. He almost smiled. I saw it in the corner of his mouth. After that, we talked a little every Tuesday. He never said what he was at the VA for, and I didn't ask. You learn not to ask. He'd ask me about the job. About fires, I remembered. About Eileen, after I let her name slip one night. He listened the way a man listens when he's actually trying to hear you, not waiting for his turn. I hadn't been listened to like that in a long time. In May, he asked me to stop at a diner on Devon on the way back. He said the food at Lakeshore was killing him slower than whatever the doctors were watching. I pulled into the lot and we sat in a booth, and he ordered a grilled cheese and a cup of coffee and ate about a third of it. He paid for both of us and tipped the waitress $20 on a $14 check. You don't have to do that, I said. I have more money than I have time, Frank. The math is what it is. I asked him then, careful, what he used to do. Federal bench, he said. Northern District of Illinois. 34 years, senior status the last 6. They finally pried me off it in 2019. A judge. A federal judge. I'd been driving a man who used to sit in a robe and decide the rest of people's lives, and he'd been letting me complain about the Kennedy Expressway like I was the interesting one. Family? I asked, because the question was already in my mouth. He looked at his coffee for a long time. A daughter, he said. Vivian. She lives in Lake Forest. She comes to see me on the first Sunday of every month, between 2 and 3. She brings a card. The card is always blank inside. She signs her name and the year. I didn't know what to say to that. My wife, he said, passed in 2008. Cancer. We had only the one. Vivian was a late child, 42 when she was born. We were not, I think, the parents she needed. I know that feeling, I said. I hadn't meant to. He looked at me across the table then. Really looked. And something passed between us that I can't put into words even now. 2 old men in a diner on Devon Avenue, both of us with kids who'd grown up to be strangers. Both of us at the tail end of the only lives we were going to get. Frank, he said, would you mind if we did this again next week? The diner. The diner. We did. Every Tuesday from May through July. Grilled cheese for him. A patty melt for me. He'd talk about cases he could finally talk about because the principals were all dead. I'd talk about Eileen. About the boys. About the night in 1994 we lost 2 guys in a warehouse fire on the south side, and I came home and put my arm around Daniel, who was 10, and Daniel pulled away because I smelled like smoke, and he was scared of it, and I never tried again. I told the judge that. I'd never told anyone that, not even Eileen. He listened. He didn't fix it. He didn't tell me what I should have done. He just listened, and at the end he said, Frank, the worst thing about being a father is that you don't get to apologize on a delay. The apology has to land while the child is still small enough to receive it. After that, it becomes something they have to grow into accepting, and most of them never do. I sat in my truck for a long time after I dropped him off that night. In early August, the shuttle manifest had a note next to his name. Kane required. I went up to his room for the first time. Lakeshore Manor was the kind of place that smelled like lilies in the lobby and disinfectant by the elevators. His room was at the end of the hall on the 3rd floor. A nameplate on the door read, Whitfulmed. He answered when I knocked, leaning on a cane I hadn't seen him use before. Bad week, he said. Don't make a fuss. He didn't tell me what was wrong, but I could see it in his face. Something had let go in him over the last few days. He moved slower. He kept blinking like the light was too much. In the truck, he forgot the name of the diner halfway through, telling me he wanted to go there. He laughed at himself, but it was a thin laugh. Frank, he said over his grilled cheese, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly. All right. Where were you born? Right here. Resurrection Hospital. April of 1960. And your mother? What was her name? Margaret. Margaret Donovan. She passed in 2003. Donovan was her married name. No, sir. She never married. I took her name. It was always just the 2 of us. He set his sandwich down. His hand was shaking more than usual. Did she ever tell you about your father, Frank? I didn't answer right away. It's not a question you get asked often. At 65, my mother had told me when I was about 7 and asked that my father was a young man she'd loved at school and that he'd had to go and live his life elsewhere, and that it wasn't a sad story, only a quiet one. I'd asked twice more in my life, once at 13, once when Eileen was pregnant with Daniel. Both times she'd told me the same thing in almost the same words, and both times I'd let it go because she'd asked me to. She told me he was a boy she knew in college, I said. She didn't say more. I didn't push. He nodded. He looked down at the Formica. Where did she go to college, Frank? DePaul. She studied to be a nurse. She was a year shy of finishing when she had me. She went back later in the 70s. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I went to Loyola Law in those years, 1958 to 61. Some of the boys in my class dated DePaul nursing students. There was a pub on Sheffield. Hanran's, I said, before I even thought about it. My mother used to sing songs from there when she was cooking. I never knew where it was. He looked up at me then. His eyes were wet. He was a man who didn't cry, and I could see him not crying. holding it down with the kind of practice that takes a lifetime. Frank, I'd like to take you somewhere on Saturday if you'd let me. I have something I want to show you. I didn't sleep that week. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was a 65-year-old man too old to start chasing ghosts. But Saturday morning, I put on a clean shirt and drove out to Lakeshore Manor, and the aide brought him down in his overcoat and his polished shoes, and he handed me an address on a piece of paper. It was a row of brick 2-flats in Rogers Park. He had me park across the street from one with green shutters. My family rented the upper floor in 1959, he said. I lived there during my second year of law school. My father didn't approve of my friends. My mother sent me grocery money in an envelope every month. My lover sent me grocery money in an envelope every month. I looked at the house. There was a girl, Frank, a nursing student. Her name was Maggie. I knew her for 7 months. My father found out in the spring of '60. He told me she was not a person I could marry. He told me he had already arranged for her to receive money to leave the city and to never contact me. I was 22 years old. I believed him. I let her go. I gripped the steering wheel because I didn't trust my hands. I never knew she was pregnant. I swear to you on my wife's grave, Frank, I never knew. I married Eleanor in 1965. I made a life. I made a career. But I thought about Maggie every year on her birthday, which was the 11th of October. And 5 years ago, after Eleanor died and Vivian made it clear she would not be having children, I hired a man to find her. He found her obituary. He also found a birth certificate. April of 1960, Resurrection Hospital, a boy, no father listed. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to do, Frank. I'm a coward in the things that matter most. I had the man keep looking. He found you. He found you, your service record. He found Eileen's obituary. He found a photograph of you at the Chicago Fire Department 25th anniversary dinner. You look like my father. You have my mother's hands. I sat in my room at Lakeshore for 14 months, working up the nerve to do something about it. And then I started getting sick, and I knew I was running out of time, and I asked my doctor about the VA shuttle. And I requested the Tuesday route because the man I'd hired told me that was the night you drove. You planned this, I said. Yes, all of it. Yes, the diner, the questions. I wanted to know who you were before I told you. I wanted to know who you were before I told you. I wanted to know if I deserved to tell you. Frank, I have spent 65 years not being your father. I did not earn the right to walk up to you and claim it. I had to know what kind of man you'd become without me. And I had to know if you were the kind of man who would have wanted to know. I sat there in the truck on a Saturday morning in August, looking at a house where, 65 years before, a young man had been told by his father to let a young woman go, and the young woman had been my mother. And the young man was sitting next to me in a wool coat from 1982, with hands that shook and tears running down his face that he wasn't bothering to wipe anymore. I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I said, "Did she know you'd looked for her?" "No." She passed before I started. "Did she ever tell you my name?" "No." She protected me, Frank, from everything, including from myself. I drove him back to Lakeshore Manor. I walked him up to his room. I sat in the chair by his window for 2 hours, and I didn't say much, and he didn't either. When I left, he held my arm at the door, and he said, "I do not need anything from you, Frank. I do not need you to call me anything. I do not need you to forgive me. I only needed you to know." I called him Sir on the way out. I couldn't make any other word come. Over the next 4 months, I went to Lakeshore Manor every Saturday and most Sunday afternoons. I stopped driving the Tuesday shuttle. I didn't trust myself behind the wheel of someone else's vehicle anymore. I drove my own truck and I brought him sandwiches from the deli on Clark Street, and we sat in his room and we talked about everything we hadn't gotten to. He told me about my mother. He told me she'd sung Carrick Fergus off-key the night they met. He told me she'd had a chipped front tooth she was self-conscious about, and that when she laughed, she covered her mouth. I knew about the tooth. I'd grown up watching her cover her mouth. I told him about Eileen. I told him about the boys. I told him about the Father's Day card from Connor. He asked if he could see it, and I brought it the next Saturday, and he held it in his hands like it was evidence in a trial. "Frank," he said, "you have time. Not much, but more than I had." In October, he stopped getting out of bed. By November, he was on hospice in the room. His daughter, Vivian, came on the first Sunday of November between 2 and 3, and she stayed 22 minutes. I was in the chair by the window. She did not speak to me. She did not ask who I was. She signed her card, set it on the dresser, and left. On the morning of December the 7th, he asked me to call his attorney. A man named Patrick Sweeney came that afternoon with a briefcase, and they spoke in private for an hour. And when Sweeney came out, he nodded at me but didn't say anything. I went back in and sat by the bed and held the judge's hand. "Frank," he said, his voice no more than air, "I want you to know I am not afraid. I have not been afraid since the first Tuesday in March." He died on the 12th of December, just before dawn. I was holding his hand. I was the only one there. The funeral was at St. Mary of the Angels. Full Catholic Mass. The pews were thick with men in dark coats, judges and lawyers and old colleagues from the federal building. Vivian sat in the front row in a black suit with a black hat. She gave the eulogy. She spoke about her father's distinguished career. She did not mention that he had died in a nursing home with a stranger in the chair next to him. She did not mention me at all. After the burial, Patrick Sweeney came to me on the cemetery path and said, "Mr. Donovan, the reading of the will is on Thursday at my office. Judge Whitfield requested your presence. I'd ask that you be there." Vivian heard him say it. She turned and looked at me across the snow, and her face was the coldest thing I have ever seen on a human being. The will reading was in a conference room downtown, with a long table and a view of the river. Vivian was there with 2 attorneys. Sweeney sat at the head. I sat at the foot, in a chair he'd pulled out for me. I had not asked to be there. I had nothing to do with any of this. I had come because the judge had asked me to. Sweeney read through the formal language. He read the bequests to the Loyola Law School Scholarship Fund. He read the bequests to 2 charities the judge's late wife had favored. Then he came to the family portion, to my daughter, Vivian Whitfield Carroll. I bequeath the sum of $100,000, the contents of the home on Sheridan Road as inventoried in Schedule B, and the jewelry of my late wife, with the exception of the wedding ring. Vivian made a sound in her throat. "The remainder of my estate," Sweeney continued, "including all real property, all investments, all retirement accounts, the residence on Sheridan Road, and all liquid assets, in total estimated at approximately $26 million, I bequeath to Francis Patrick Donovan of Chicago, Illinois." The room went still. Vivian stood up so fast her chair tipped backwards. "That is not my father's signature. It is Mrs. Carroll. He was not in his right mind. He was evaluated 3 times in the last year by physicians whose statements are attached. He was lucid throughout. This man," she pointed at me, and her hand was shaking with rage, not grief. "This man drove a shuttle. He's a stranger. He sat in my father's room for 4 months and worked on him. I will tear this will apart in court." I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I had a wedding ring in a velvet box in my pocket that the judge had asked me to keep, and a letter I hadn't read yet, and I wanted nothing else from anyone in that room. I just wanted to go home. I was at the door when Sweeney said, very quietly, "Mr. Donovan, before you go, the judge asked me to ask you a question, in this room in front of his daughter." He was very specific about that. I stopped. "Mr. Donovan," Sweeney said, taking off his glasses and setting them on the folder, "do you know who your father was?" Vivian made a sound like the air had left her. I turned around slowly. I looked at Sweeney. I looked at her. "I do," I said. Sweeney took a sealed envelope out of the folder and slid it across the table to me. "Then this is yours. He wanted you to have the chance to read it whenever you were ready. He also asked me to tell you that the inheritance has nothing to do with what you just confirmed. He told me to tell you, and I quote, 'Frank earned every dollar by being the man he is. I only happened to be in the position to recognize it.'" I picked up the envelope. I walked out. Vivian was screaming something behind me as the door closed. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck and I opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, in his handwriting, which had still been steady enough in October to be readable. He wrote that he had not loved anyone in his life the way he had loved my mother, and that the great regret of his 86 years was the day he let her walk away. He wrote that finding me had been the closing of a circle he had thought would stay open forever. He wrote that he did not expect me to think of him as my father, and that he would not have asked it of me, even if he had been able. He wrote that he wanted the money to go to me because there was no one else alive who deserved it, and because he wanted me to do 3 specific things with it. The first was to pay off whatever was left on my apartment and to fix the radiators, because he could not stand the thought of his son being cold in his own home. The second was to start a fund, in any form I chose, for the children of firefighters and police officers who had lost a parent in the line of duty, because the worst grief he had ever seen in his courtroom was the grief of children whose fathers had not come home from work. The third, and he underlined this, was to write to my sons. He wrote that I should not ask their forgiveness, because forgiveness was theirs to give in their own time. He wrote that I should simply tell them I had been thinking of them, and that I was sorry for the years I had missed, and that I would be here, in the same apartment, on the same phone number, for as long as I drew breath, and that I would answer the door no matter what hour they came. He wrote, at the bottom of the 3rd page, I had a son for 9 months in my life. They were the best 9 months of it. Thank you, Frank. I sat in the truck for a long time. I drove home with the letter on the passenger seat where he used to sit. I went up the 3 flights to my apartment. I sat in the chair by the window, the one I hadn't been able to sit in for 9 years, because it had been Eileen's, and for the first time since she died, I let myself cry the way I should have cried in 2016. Vivian filed her contest the following March. Sweeney handled it. It took 14 months. She lost on every count. The judge had been meticulous, the way only a judge can be. Every signature was witnessed. Every evaluation was current. Every clause was airtight. When the final ruling came down, Vivian did not look at me. She left through a different door. I did the things he asked. I paid off the apartment. The radiators still clang, but they're warm now. I set up the fund through a foundation downtown, and we call it the Whitfield Donovan Fund for Line of Duty Families, and last year we put 41 kids through their first year of college. I still go to the office twice a week. I read every application myself. I wrote to my sons that February, 3 handwritten letters, mailed on the same day. I told them what the judge had told me to tell them. Daniel called me in April. We talked for 40 minutes. He cried once. I cried twice. Brendan wrote back in June. He sent a photograph of a little boy in a Cubs hat. My grandson, who I had not known, was born. His name is Henry. He is 2.5. Connor took the longest. He called me on Father's Day of this year. He did not say much. He said, Dad, I got your letter. I'm not ready yet. But I wanted you to hear my voice. I told him I'd be here. I told him I'd answer when he called. I drove out to the cemetery in Wilmette last week. I sat on the bench near the judge's stone, and I told him about Henry, and about the 41 kids, and about the radiator finally not waking me up at 4 in the morning. The wind came up off the lake the way it does in October, cold and clean, and I sat there until the sun got low. I'm 65 years old. I had a father for 9 months at the end of his life and the beginning of the rest of mine. I have 3 sons, and I have one of them back the way I want him, and one of them coming, and one of them I am still waiting on, and I will wait as long as it takes. If you've made it this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if there's somebody you've been meaning to write to them tonight. Don't wait for the lawyer to ask you the question. Ask it yourself while there's still time. I have thought a great deal in the months since the judge passed about how a man ends up where he ends up. I do not believe in accidents anymore. I believe in the long, quiet pull of the choices we make and the choices that get made for us. Harlan Whitfield was told, at 22, to walk away from a nursing student named Maggie, and he walked. That single act of obedience cost him a son for 65 years, and in my own life, the night I came home smelling of smoke and watched my boy Daniel flinch away from me, I made a choice too. I chose to stop trying. I told myself it was protection. It was not protection. It was pride, dressed up in the uniform of a man who thought hardness was the same thing as love. The cause was small. The consequence was 30 years of silence. That is how it works. The seed is always smaller than the tree. What the judge gave me, in the end, was not the money. It was the chance to see my own mistakes through another man's life before my own life was over. He showed me that a coward is not a man who feels afraid. A coward is a man who lets the fear decide for him and then spends the rest of his years calling that decision wisdom. He had done it. I had done it. The difference between us, in the end, was only that he found the courage to undo what he could, and he gave me the time to try to do the same. I would say this to whoever is listening tonight. The character you build in private is the only thing that walks into the room with you when the lawyer reads the names. No one can fake it on that day. Vivian could not, with all her practiced grief and her blank cards signed once a year. The judge could, because for 30 years he had been writing letters he never sent and saving them in a drawer, hoping a son he was not sure existed might one day read them. That is the work. It is not glamorous. No one applauds you for it. It is just the slow daily decision to be a person who would not be ashamed if everything you ever did were read out loud in a quiet room. And the strength of it, the real strength, is not in standing alone. I had that wrong my whole life. The strength is in being the kind of man someone can lean on, and the kind of man who knows how to lean back when his own legs give out. Connor has not called me again yet. I do not know if he will, but I keep the phone where I can hear it, and I keep the chair by the window empty for him, and I do the work. That is all any of us can do. Do the work. Answer the door. Write the letter. Today, while there is still time,